Before we get started, we'd like to say thanks to our sponsor, Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. Plus, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Also, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Plus, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
All She Wants to Do Is Dance, the perfect 80s tune and name for the Mixed-ish episode that navigates the tightrope above race and dating. In this installment of the podcast, we follow Bo to her first dance as she confronts others' expectations of who should be on her arm. We also dissect the delicate dance of choosing a romantic partner as a biracial individual, personal preference, or political statement.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Shannon, and we're about to take you on another adventure with Bo shortly. But first, we want to say congrats to Kenya Barris and team on his new Netflix show, Black AF. I read that this is the show he would have wanted to do with Blackish, but was restricted by the ABC Family Friendly Network. So he went in on this, y'all. And Rashida Jones is playing double duty now as the grown Santa Monica on Blackish, but now his wife as well on Black AF. And she's a biracial mama of 6 kids, which is craziness, on the show. And they're playing it out as a scripted reality docuseries being directed by his daughter as part of her college application to film school. And it's hilarious. And once again, I feel like I'm watching a bit of my marriage play out on TV. Dre and now Kenya in Black AF has quite a few similarities to my husband, I'll say. So
I can't wait to watch
them. Yes, it's so funny. Yeah.
Congratulations.
So congrats to them.
Keep creating. Hi, all, this is Toronto. And before we start, I also want to point out the fun song titles. Tongue twister there.
I like fun song.
Yeah. The Mixed-ish writers are choosing for their episodes, which I so enjoy because every time an episode comes on, I sing the song. Or every time I see an episode, the name of it, I sing the song in my head, and it gets me all ready for to travel back in time to the 80s. So far, we've had Let Your Hair Down, Love is a Battlefield, and now the episode we're about to review, All She Wants to Do Is Dance. So fun.
It is. Love it. They should have called it Everybody Dance Now in honor of Erica Kimball's mother.
That's good.
but I get why they chose this title. And who am I anyway? So.
And they do. Everyone does dance at the end of the episode. I'm sorry. I have to spoil it a little. Spoiler alert. But just so you know, it is wrapped up in a nice bow at the end.
Okay. Yes, that's awesome. Well, let's get started. So Bo is on another adventure, and this time it's adventures in dating as a biracial individual. It's not enough that the relationships that produce our existence are often the target for all manner of opinions, but then our own choice of who we love comes under the microscope when we're coming of age, often setting up a double whammy of relationship drama, which is on full display in this episode.
Oh, all I wanted to do is dance in tea. I really did like to dance. But like I also learned it is not that simple when it comes to dating and being a biracial young woman. Adolescence is tough enough without throwing America's hang-ups, fetishes, and fabricated taboos in the mix. This episode opens with one of those perfect, non-preachy, spot-on monologues by the adult Bo, Tracy Ellis Ross, reflecting on the range of reactions to the simple image of a black man with a white woman or a black woman with a white man can conjure. And in showing, recent red carpet shots of interracial couples, it perfectly tests the audience's own repressed assumptions and reactions. So I have to admit, my frontal lobe lit up when I saw Russell Wilson and Sierra. Sierra, I mean, not just because of the Sierra connection. I just also think he's a heartthrob.
Yes, they're really cute. Yeah, sweet Bo innocently and enthusiastically announcing she decides to announce the impending Sadie Hawkins dance to her family, and an invitation that immediately complicates the matter for her.
Yeah. Yes, the family always weighs in. They are not quiet. As usual, her younger siblings school Bo on the potential minefields. Her date can say no, Johann reminds her, which sends her, as a 12-year-old girl into a tizzy. And then she announces she has set her sights on a white classmate. Of course, Aunt Dee Dee can't help but opine that she already has enough cream in her coffee and that she needs to invite a black date, so everyone doesn't think she's the maid when Bo and her future family get together. Talk about pressure. But of course, Bo's parents tell Dee Dee that they raised her.
Oh, there we go again.
Here we go again. Which, again, we mean that in the best light, because that is a very, very common approach to race in America. And it's fun when they break it all down nearly every episode, that approach. Mm-hmm. So Shannon, Aunt Dee Dee totally projects her own issues onto Bo. The whole family does, really, in typical fashion. Mm-hmm. What did your parents tell you about dating, and who was your first date?
I feel like, my parents kind of avoided some of this direct talk, but they might say, no, we didn't. They hear this, but my parents allowed me to date once I was in high school. And my first date was in 9th grade at the school homecoming dance. And it came with a bit of unnecessary drama. My first date. I actually went with quite the diverse group of kids. There was 6 of us, 3 couples, and no one was actually dating. We just partnered up to all go as friends. And I was supposed to go with a friend I knew since middle school, and he was Black and also an athlete like me. So I thought it would be fun. And the other couples included 2 of my basketball teammates, and one was Chinese and was going with her good friend who happened to be biracially Black and white as well, like me. I think I just invented a word, biracially. I don't know if that's and the other 2 were white Italian couple. I believe that was their ethnicity, their heritage. But 2 days before the dance, my date backed out. To this day, I have no idea why. It could have been because he was nervous or wasn't allowed or didn't have the money or just didn't feel like it. I don't know. But yeah, he ghosted me for real.
Ouch.
I know. So one of the other moms wasn't having it and got me a date with another one of the group's friends, one of the guys' friends, with this really nice kid who I knew since elementary school, like 3rd grade. And he was white, and it was all a bit embarrassing, but because we were all good friends, just going, as friends, there was no pressure and it wasn't a super big deal. So it turned out to be fine, and it was fun and sweet, and he gave me a corsage and we all took pictures together and all that jazz. And I'll definitely have to post a photo on the blog. I'll blur their faces out. I'll be respectful, but yeah, it was an interesting first date. But I had crushes on Black boys, white boys, biracial, Italian, Latino, all of it. And I guess you could say I just didn't discriminate. And I didn't get into seriously dating until mid high school. But I definitely think that race had an influence in that. And I was way too nervous to be around boys in a romantic way. So
that's interesting.
What about you?
Yeah, I was a late bloomer. I had crushes. I mean, I literally remember my first crush when I was 5 years old, which is terrifying because I have a 5-year-old. But I had crushes, but I didn't date till just later, like in high school or whatever. And I wonder, looking back, if I didn't have some repressed anxiety about what race to date. I don't think so, because I always have been like, I like who I like. As a young woman, or even as a woman, I like the rainbow. Like I dated Scots and I dated Kareems, and I just like who I like, but man, my first crush, he was white. Most of my peers, remember if you've been listening to the podcast, I grew up in Bellevue, Washington in the 80s, and it was very white. And so my first crush was white. He was older than I was. I did ask him finally to a Sadie Hawkins dance. We called it Tolo. It was completely awkward. And that actually taught me a lot. So it taught me not to put too much stake in someone who you really don't know, because after that, I was so over him.
That's funny.
And I just had so much anxiety about asking him to the date. And I kind of wonder what his parents may have thought about me. And I think there was some racial things on my own part for that, not that I picked up on, but for me. And again, that was repressed. I didn't know what it was back in the day. Just being different than him, right? So Bo, getting to Bo now, she brainstorms how to invite soccer star Bryce to the dance, which includes a hilarious failed first attempt when she chickens out on the phone. Eventually, she asks him to the dance in person, and she's on cloud 9 when he says yes. Johan, hangs out around the girls' bathroom and lands a date with an older woman, Michaela, Latina. This is Bo's Latina girlfriend. And she asks him to check the yes box, and he does. And then little sister Santa Monica and Grandpa Harrison decide they'll go on their own date, which is a very funny scene later on. And it's so instructive of what happens with her as an older woman. But meanwhile, Dee Dee challenges Paul that he does in fact see color, because it comes out that he loves to call attention to Alicia as his black wife. My black wife this, my black wife that. Like, clearly like, proud of her, but also like, right? Things that make you go, So this leads Alicia to worry that, yeah, maybe Paul likes her not for who she is, but because she is a type. Like, he has a fetish for black women. And so this sets up what is often the crux of controversy surrounding interracial dating, the type question. This is the black guy your type? Is the blonde guy your type? What's really going on here? Why are you really with somebody? Did you ever have a type, Shannon? Did the fetish phenomenon ever impact your dating life?
I mean, if I had a type, it was strongly influenced by my dad. And I would say that my husband is similar to him in many ways too. And he happens to be black. But if I look back at my crushes, I think I liked those that had different parts of my personality and interests. And I had a few white boys interested in me, but mostly black boys in college. No fetishes, really. I will say that it hurt to hear people talk about that, about biracial relationships in that way. And there are people who, have clear types, and I understand that. But to reduce like my parents' relationship, for example, to that, though, it often was hurtful to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a type?
No, I really was an equal opportunity lender. I just, it was often applicable. Even I like tall men, like I did. I don't know where that came.
Yeah.
Because I am not tall. But I didn't only date tall men. It was just part of the allure of what attracted me to them physically. As I mentioned, I dated Scots, I dated Kareems. I will say that after my very first crush, this was the 6th when I was 5 or 6.
I like how, by the way, hold on. I like how you say Scots and Kareems, because I have to point out that one of the guys I dated was a black guy named Scott. So.
I dated a blonde
maybe Matthew, Scott, but, maybe Justin. I don't know.
Yeah. I just was trying to. That just really offset Kareem, the Scott.
Yeah.
But both wonderful men wherever they are now. But I have to say, so at 6, my first crush was a black boy. He was a family friend, and man, I loved him all the way through high school. Hope you're doing well up there, Kyle. He knows. So he's very happily married, and I'm happily married now. But most of the guys I talked to growing up and dated or had crushes on were white, just based on who I was around, right? And some of it was like the Ricky Schroeder syndrome too. Remember? Ricky Schroeder, like the TV shows that were on. A lot of them like blonde hair, blue eye boys who were just like the teeny bopper boys in Bop magazine. Do you remember?
Yes.
So think about who was in there, right? So that's who I like wanted to look like, and that's who I wanted to date. Like I wasn't hating myself. I wasn't hating black boys. But I remember my mom, I remember being bummed some of the times so these boys weren't giving me the time of day. And this might sound, I don't know how to say this, but I think it was really insightful of my mom. At some point, she took me aside and said, really gently and like in a really supportive, loving way, like really nurturing, like a mom probably should have, like honesty. Like, have you ever tried to throw some color in the mix there? You know? Have you ever tried, to pursue the black boys or let the black boys pursue you? Maybe they'll, and I
diversify, Tarana, diversify,
which, was a beautiful, suggestion, and so some people may take that as my mom was rejecting the fact that a white man could like me, but she really wasn't. But I thought about that for a long time, because when I got to college, I definitely pursued relationships with black men. And it was refreshing to have more of a variety of men around. But that always stuck with me. But you didn't see too many interracial couples back then on TV, like we do now in sitcoms and commercials, like Mixed Dish.
Right.
But back to Bo, even though so that really formed, all those influences formulated who I dated and who I was attracted to. But so even though Bo is excited about the dance, these societal hangups represented in Aunt Dee Dee torpedo her hopes. Her family's out dress shopping for this special Sadie Hawkins dance. And Aunt Dee Dee asked, okay, so who's this date? Will I need a flash or is the date white? So Bo caves upon seeing the date in the store, because Aunt Dee Dee is like, oh no, this is the white boy you're trying
to date. She's embarrassed.
Poor Bowen goes and hides in the clothes rack, the poor thing. And all she can do is just uninvite him. And she's just so overwhelmed. But Aunt Dee Dee is pleased that Johan's date on the flip side is Latina, which is hilarious. That scene is so telling. Of, again, other people imposing their stuff on us. But then we see this great heart-to-heart with Bo and her aunt, which reminds me how impressionable young people are. They just want to be accepted. They just want to feel like they're doing the right thing. So Bo really internalizes Aunt Dee Dee's preference that she dates black. But Dee Dee finally tells her, I love you. You do you. You have to have a thicker skin, though, if you're going to play in the snow, which is one of the funniest lines in the episode.
Yeah, I love that line.
So she asks Bryce again via fax, which is hilarious. He checks yes and faxes her back.
I'm just like, did you ever fax anyone? I never faxed anyone. I was just like, this is so random.
But I love it.
Is this real?
I just love that it just took me back.
I mean, I totally get it. But I'm like, at 12, was anyone really faxing each other? But it's cute.
But you did try to get creative with how you ask people out, so it was
believable. Okay, I get it.
It was believable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then back to Paul and Alicia. Paul wonders if he is just Alicia's first taste of white cheddar again. Best line of the episode. So regardless of age, we really see, in this episode that we're all susceptible to external forces mixed with personal preference and who we're attracted to.
Totally.
And this is what the dating game becomes. Shannon, what was happening around you? Was there a lot of interracial dating? You talked about this great diverse group of friends you have, but how did you think that compares with the representation of biracial couples we see today? Did you see that among young people?
Well, yeah. So today, I mean, we see multicolor, multiracial families everywhere. And it's awesome. And it's again, depending on what part of the country you live, it's slightly normalized. I would say definitely in LA, it's very normalized, living there. But by the time I was in high school and of dating age, my school was getting, in my city, it was getting very diverse. We had immigrant and refugee families, transracial adoption families, and it was becoming a melting pot. And today the school has over 70 languages spoken there. So it's grown a lot. But it was, you know, it still was a majority white school and majority white culture school. I would say, like, most people trying to assimilate to that. And, just very whitewashed culture. But we were in the era as well of like the greatest hip hop ever, Biggie, Tupac, they were assassinated around the, high school time for me. And then a young Jay-Z was rising up, and it just like hip hop was just trending, and girls were dressing like boys, like, and it was just, that was the thing. And, they were just Black kids. We just were like really rocking the hip hop culture, and it was just so fun. But anywho, there was some interracial dating, and I would say that it was mostly white kids wanting to assimilate into Black culture than vice versa, which is interesting, if you could believe that or not. And then the white and preppy remained white and preppy, and there were a few sprinkles of a biracial girl dating a white guy, or a Black preppy guy dating a white girl here or there. But and there was a lot of Asian and Caucasian dating.
Oh yeah.
But so
yeah. Gosh, it's so interesting because I am a little older than you, and it's
just
a little bit. I mean, that's amazing, just the difference. So that was starting to happen.
Yeah.
That kind of dominance of Black culture and hip hop was starting to happen when I was graduating. So I graduated in '94 from high school, and so it hadn't quite turned the corner.
Yeah.
I often wonder how my experience would have been different if I had gone to school just a little later. So interesting.
Because just 4 years before that was like serious racial tension as the school was diversifying, specifically with white and Black. And there was even like a riot that like broke out. So it was like, it was integrating more, and it was just like, Black kids were like, we're not putting up with this anymore, and there was just a lot of controversial stuff, with Black kids being the ones blamed for things that white kids were starting. And, but so I was kind of on the tail end of that tension. It was still there, but it wasn't, as bold in your face. And then by the time my youngest sister was there, I mean, it was like harmony and hand holding. Let's all, link arms, so to speak. I'm sure there's still tension there, but it is pretty amazing. And I think I'm going to post this graduation video from the high school's graduation last year, because they're not having it this year because of this pandemic we're facing. But I think it was last year or the year before, where they listed out all of the languages or all the countries represented, and it just went on and on and on. So I'll add that to the blog. But it's interesting regionally what people face.
Yes.
And depending on what cultures, you might be facing just mostly a Black and white specific tension, but there's also, like living out in LA, I remember having a lot of Latino and Black tension, and just depending on what's going on, and where you are.
That's so interesting. Pacific Northwest was a unique that also had a lot to do with my experience personally. And Bo, so I was, I guess, a few years younger than Bo is on the show. She's 12 on the show. I think I was 9 in 1985. But so just imagine what her white date's parents were thinking, right? We don't get to hear his side of the story. And hopefully he was
we haven't met his family.
An awesome kid, but that is a part that's left out of the equation. You can only do so much. The writers can only do so much in 22 minutes. People, okay. But I do wonder, like, he was thrilled. He was so happy to be with her. But I do wonder what mom and dad thought about
and if they knew
beautiful girl and her natural hair and all this. But anyway, I recently had a white family member on my white side reach out, and say, I really want to talk to you about something. I'm really glad she did this, but she was worried about a niece or a cousin or something because they got engaged to a black man, a young black man. And they were kind of poking around. It was such an interesting, surreal conversation to me because they're basically poking around because they were worried about her and worried about them and worried about their biracial, what would be biracial children. And they had this assumption that I had maybe a really hard time with it growing up. Again, that tragic mulatto maybe assumption. But on the flip side, she was very sensitive to the fact that there were parts that were really hard, but still, what I just was struck by remembering that conversation as we went to prepare this episode of the podcast, because that was just like a couple years ago. And so the prospect of interracial relationships still sparks this reaction. And we say we're in quote unquote post-racial America.
No.
No.
Can I respond to that for a moment? Because I get that reaction from folks, but it just also isn't the only reason I gather that she or other family members are concerned for their family members dating outside of their race. I think there's also this fear of the unfamiliar, obviously, but because if you haven't been communing with people outside of your race at all, or you now will be forced to face them, so to speak, and forced to face your bias against them and your lack of knowledge when it comes to that race. I mean, that is really what I feel like that talk embodies when you're talking about, I'm fearing for how you're going to be treated. I think is all lumped in all of those thoughts too, because, my parents heard the same thing. Well, it's really that we're afraid for you all, like we're, your life is going to be hard.
Yes. Yes. What will she call herself? I think my parents said, well, what will she call herself? Some, my grandparents asked my parents, like, well, what will she, when they knew they were pregnant with me, what will become of this child? It's like,
yeah.
But that was 44 years ago when my grandparents had that concern about my parents. And then again, this family remember bringing this up to me. I was just surreal. And maybe I'm letting her off the hook. She's a good woman. And I was really appreciative that she was honest with me.
And most people, I'm sorry, are good and nice. But
no, I'm glad you said
it doesn't mean.
It's clearly, she clearly didn't know what she didn't know, So
yeah. We all have biases.
I guess at this point, I'm just used to teaching. So I went mode and, but I was like thrown off for sure.
Yeah. Yes. Put on the spot.
Ooh, it's interesting.
Toronto.
Okay. Yeah. So in 1985, we finally get to this dance. And the scene of this dance opens to the theme song from St. Elmo's Fire. Everyone was having a good time. Bo concludes that love is about communication and not choosing those you think you should be with. She's really set favored by this, and we see it in her funky dancing, which is super, super cute. And Paul and Alicia are more in love with each other than ever at the end of the episode, and they realize what matters most is choosing each other one day at a time. They never quite resolve the type thing, do they? I mean, that's kind of interesting, but they definitely, I think, come around to the fact that I'm still with this person. I love them clearly for who they are, and I choose to choose them every day. And then we see the seeds of Santa Monica's preference for rich men as grandpa, because as she becomes an adult, this is part of her character, right? Like she sees older rich men, and we see that the seeds of this are when Grandpa Harrison treats her to a fancy restaurant, which is such a smart allusion to how much who we love is about nature and nurture, right? Who's around us, who we see showing us love in different ways. And so we're just left to do our best to be honest with ourselves and the ones we love. Right, Shannon? What will you tell your kids about their choices?
Yeah, I think I will tell my kids that if they date someone outside of their race, that person needs to be kind and respectful and love God, of course, but also be a strong ally for Black and brown people, period. And in this age of information and technology, There's also no excuse to not be educated about our history and the history we're making every day in the United States of America. Race relations aren't going anywhere, so let's not pretend we don't see color. And I would just pray that they choose someone that celebrates everything about them. What
Amen.
about you? Anything to add?
No, just that I just want to look at that person and know they love my girls inside out. I welcome anybody into my family, and I will definitely be an honest parent, no matter who they choose.
Yes. And now it's time for our mixed message of the day. So for today's mixed message, we invite you to share anecdotes about dating someone who was or is a different race than you. What did people around you say? Send us a DM and share with us through our website, mixedlifeatl.com, or find us on social media at mixedlifeatl. Make sure to tune in for the next episode of Mixed-ish called Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That's all we have for today's show. Until next time, stay safe and peace out. Mixed Life ATL is recorded in Atlanta, Georgia, and produced by SDB 360 LLC and Capacity Media. You can hear us wherever mainstream podcasts can be found. For information on how to advertise your business on this podcast, please message us at mixedlifeatl.com.